Hey folks, so today we're going to talk about the state of affairs. Where exactly are we in the year 2026? And the reason we're going to talk about this, despite this being a difficult topic, is that if we don't understand what's happening out there, if you don't understand, because most of us, we live in our own silos, and we tend to also project our own experiences outwards, and for a lot of people who might not have seen the dark underbelly of the world, what's happening, some of the trend lines that we are going towards, they might think everything's hunky-dory. But we got to take a proper research-focused approach and just look at everything, the dark underbelly included, so that we can understand what exactly, where are we, what needs to be fixed, and how it can be fixed. So with that in mind, and there's an extension of this thought, it's not just about taking individual cases like 1 in a million, 1 in a billion cases. It's about looking at humanity as a whole, but also as individuals. When it comes to individuals, it's about being able to create these personas. What's happening with, for example, young men, what's happening with young women, what's happening with these different sections of society. And that's what we're going to try to do in this conversation. I mean, this could have been like a couple of hours, and I've got so many notes because I started taking an active interest. And we're obviously going to focus, and you talk of the state of the world, you can talk of n number of things. This conversation is going to be more focused on the state of the world when it comes to relationships, social connection, meaning, the meaning making, purpose, depth of connections, well, quality of connections, to use an umbrella term, and state of tech. The reason I'm including tech in this, and culture for that matter, the reason I'm including those two is that relationships and culture are deeply intertwined. And tech has also become deeply intertwined with relationships, for better or for worse. We obviously hope to make it for better, but up until now it's been for worse. I mean, you just look at the track record of the Instagrams of the world and the Tinders of the world, what they've done for relationships, and it's been an absolute bloodbath when it comes to relationship quality and relationship satisfaction. So we obviously try to change that, but to be able to do that, you've got to diagnose the problem. So that's what we're going to do. This is a kind of an extension of the why we built LNT. Because when I started paying attention to these trends like 3 years back, I think, up until then I was completely oblivious to what's happening in these particular realms or arenas of social life and just life in general. Right, my focus was just tech and physics and a few related things. But since the last 3 years, since I recognized this to be a problem by observing a lot of things around me, reading a lot of stuff, and I don't know where the seed of the idea was, that's for a different conversation. I do have a rough inkling of that. Because this has been the kind of project that you don't get an insight and you're like, okay, I got to devote not the rest of my life, hopefully, but the next 10 years of my life expressly to this thing. It wasn't one of those. It was more like I've had a lot of foundational experiences, I've seen a lot of things, read a lot of things, and over time, when these ideas came together in the unique concoction that is my mind, it was like, okay, we're not doing too well as a species, are we? And if you're not, what can we fix? So that's how this started. Anyways, when I started observing the state of the world, trend lines, and numbers around all of the things that we're going to talk about, I realized that if I don't do this, it would be an absolute dereliction of my duty, because I want to build a better world, not for ourselves, but for our future generations. If you don't do that, then that's just would be unacceptable in my book. So I was compelled to, at a very deep level, this is like a calling for me to, let's just say, fix these issues before they get out of hand and they create a permanent state of, even if it's not expressed dystopia at the level, right, there are different levels of dystopia. And compared to a utopia, even a par for the fair existence is dystopia. Because the distance between a dystopia and the par for the fair existence is as much as the distance between the middle of the road existence and dystopia, the absolute worst dystopia. So relatively speaking, it's pretty dire. And the world I want to build, we should not settle. And it's in the human spirit, right? This is such a foundational part of our being, at least my being, and a lot of the people that I see, that we should not settle for the status quo. This is why we believe that everyone can have the best relationships, everyone can have the best, can have soulmates, everyone can have the best collaborations, the best friendships. This is eminently possible with the right technology, with the right incentives, with the right forces in play. And again, that's what we're trying to do over here. Now, the nature of this is going to be different from a lot of my other conversations, where I tend to focus on technology, take an optimistic view of the future, because again, that's how I'm wired. But over here, we're going to talk about some gloomy stuff. I'm not going to go way too into the gloomy stuff, as much as I could, as much as I possibly should. And, when we do LNT podcasts, we'll actually have these conversations, because you really got to look at the beast in its eyes to be able to, defeat the beast, right? So some of these problems then do need you to have a reckoning with the dire state of affairs. And you can't do that by having a superficial look. And as much as I've done my research and, studied these arenas, I'm still very much a newbie, very much an amateur when it comes to really understanding the absolute scope and scale of these problems. So, with that in mind, despite me being an idealist, a utopian, I got to look at the things that are local dystopias and some of these even global dystopias to be able to move the timelines, trend lines towards a positive direction and move the shift our timelines, which is what we're trying to do over here. So, where are we in the year of the Lord 2026? Now, based on a lot of indicators, again, your mileage may vary, but I'm taking a look at groups and millions of people. This is not about individual experiences. There are people who are doing really well, right? There are monks who couldn't be happier, that physically couldn't be happier. And there are a lot of people who are living their best lives, though I do contend that literally for 99% of humanity, and this is, then we got to have a philosophical debate about to what degree should you optimize your life. If you are happy to the 99%, should you really work insanely hard at getting that to 99.99%, right? Because again, diminishing returns and all of that. That's for a separate conversation. What I contend is that we are not doing too well as a species. Millions among us. Most of us are not doing too well. And you would notice that if you paid just a little bit of attention. Beyond all of the tech, all of the glamour, all of, the progress that we've been making, a lot of the trend lines, a lot of the indicators are blinking red. They're pointing in the wrong direction. And it's not looking too good for us. Now, we're not going to go up in all of these, right? We don't have the time for that. But we are going to touch upon a few, especially the major ones. Let's just start with the biggest one, the elephant in the room. I mean, that's not really an elephant in the room. People call it the loneliness crisis. I like to frame it as the quality of relationship crisis. So sure, there are a lot of lonely people, and that is a huge problem that we will solve, no doubt about it. But absolute acute loneliness, that's probably 10%, 20%, 30% of the population. That is massive, by the way. These are insanely astounding numbers, unacceptable numbers. But I also focus on the 60% of humanity, 50% of humanity. They might have relationships, but the relationship quality is not as good as it could be. Right? Again, different levels. Some people could go from 30% to 50%. 30% might be acceptable, but if they're at 50% of relationship satisfaction, just to think about the quality of life improvement with the same person, right? This is not about, yeah. So there's a lot of scope for improvement. Most relationships are pretty miserable. Most marriages end up, not being successful. A lot of marriages end up being failing. 1 in 2 marriages in the US and the UK, 1 in, just look at the advanced countries and you look at Japan, you look at fertility rates, people don't even want to commit anymore, right? People don't even have hope for the future. You look at the meaninglessness crisis, you look at the mental health epidemics, you look at the rise of some of the toxic cultures. I mean, you can take your pick. I don't want to necessarily name those, but you just got to do some cursory research and you would understand you can talk about the polarization between the genders for that matter. You got to look at South Korea when it comes to polarization. How can you not mention that? And then when it comes to birth rates, how can you not mention that? A country that's projected to lose 97% of its population in the next 3 generations. Those are, cataclysmic existential numbers, and that's true for a lot of the many of the nations today. And they are trending towards a world that it would, if it's not true today, it'll be true in 5 years. So pretty dire. And a lot of these things are deeply intertwined. I mean, we contend that all of these things are deeply intertwined to a lack of meaning, a lack of just having robust, meaningful relationships. Again, that ties to lack of meaning, right? Humans, for the most part, the greatest meaning, unless you're really passionate about the kind of work that you're doing, unless you're a physicist or unless you're a monk, for most people, the source of the greatest meaning is going to be the relationships. And if the relationships are not in a good place, then you will have this void in your life, which most people have today. Religion has just taken a backseat, so that creates a vacuum, that creates a void, and we've not been able to find a way to, fill that void. There is increasing misogyny, increasing misandry, and a lot of these things, they might not even be at the highest level. The misogyny was probably much, much worse back in the day, but they are at an unacceptable level. And year of 2026, we should not have, these things be at the level that they are, right? And again, we'll make the case for how technology contributes to this, how culture contributes to a lot of these things. Then we see the sheer number of people for whom their role models are people like Musk and Trump and Andrew Tate and people like that. That again reveals a deep rot in our society, right? When the vacuum is so glaring, the hole is so gaping that people look up to these people for all the people that you can look up to. I'm sure I'll upset a few people, but those people are not meant to be the audience, so happy to offend those people who got offended by the last sentence. And then we see an increasing level of transactionalism in society and relationships, situationships and casual relationships and all of that. And again, that reveals that people just don't have the emotional skills or the belief that things can work out, and they miss out because there are certain experiences in life that are only possible with a deep bonding. Even a deep sense of meaning likely comes from that, right? And I don't want to, there are a lot of personal beliefs that I have about relationships, about the world, and I try very hard not to impose those beliefs. I try to, again, this is a very nuanced conversation, right? Like, to what degree are my own personal beliefs incorporated into the platform design and into what we're building? And I try to take strong opinions, and then there are things that, so there are two buckets, right? There are like, okay, I really want people to have the best relationships. And most people would agree with me on this front. Now, if I were to say one of my personal beliefs is that beyond a certain number, casual relationships are not optimal for society. And a lot of people might disagree with that. So again, perfectly fine. And again, obviously when you build something, you've got to have your own convictions. But you also got to have the nuance that you don't have all of the right answers. And our platform is not going to be the only solution in the, in the world of 2050, right? So there'll always be people who might seek other solutions for the kinds of things that they seek out of life. It's just that we are not for those kinds of things. And we got to be objective, we got to be honest with ourselves about, first of all, obviously not wanting to have every single person on the planet on our platform, right? Even though in one way, the target addressable market is potentially every single person, because everyone wants to have a better relationship. Everyone wants to have the best people in their lives. But the way people seek these might not be really compatible with some of the beliefs that we have. So that's not really a part of this conversation. This is a part of another conversation, but I just felt that I should mention that. Related to this, a lot of pop culture, songs and movies and all of that, they glamorize transactionalism and superficiality and even singlehood, and you can easily live in a way that you don't even feel the need to do the things that are really good for you. You become normalized to an existence that you don't even know is not good for you, is not optimal for you. And so many people live these lives. I say that with confidence because I have been one of those people. You can easily blind yourself into believing that you don't want something, when deep down you might really want it, or you might really need it. But we can easily fool ourselves, right? And that's what a lot of people do with a lot of these rhetorics around you don't need relationships. Relationships, again, there will be a lot of people who don't need them. But if it's coming from a place of anger and hurt and having a lot of baggage, which compels people to not want to do that, and lack of trust and all of that, then that is not a healthy place from which that impulse comes from. It could be a healthy place if it's coming from a place of wanting to devote your life towards the sciences or the arts and not wanting I wouldn't even want to call it distractions, but not wanting to have anything else come in the way of your pursuits. And I, again, used to be one of those people, not anymore. But I can see that perspective. That's a completely different perspective from settling for not wanting to have a relationship because the world's telling you that you'll be just fine, and believing that falsehood. That is a falsehood for you in particular, for most people in particular, because conditioning is such a powerful force. So yeah, that's a pretty significant trend line that I've been observing. And then we go to look at relationships themselves. Only a handful of people, really tiny number of people, achieve truly fulfilling relationships, achieve truly fulfilling friendships. Most people, again, subpar in these realms, in these domains. And going back to the point about loneliness, a lot of people might not feel truly lonely. They might feel occasionally lonely. But loneliness is a spectrum, and most people are on the spectrum. Which, again, doesn't have to be that way. But technology can change that. The right technology, the right impetus. Then there's the increasing addiction to technology itself, spending time with screens becoming these simulacras, this increasing trend of virtuality, where people are replacing their real human needs with screens, and over time you're going to have AIs that will play the roles of human companions. And I'm talking of a different kind of companion compared to the kind of companion we spoke about yesterday and the kind of companion that we're building. I'm talking of something that will ostensibly be designed to replace your girlfriend or boyfriend. And I mean, you're already seeing that with what, Jesus Christ. Literally seeing this with what OpenAI is doing, with what Grok is doing, XAI is doing, right? So it's not even science fiction. Mainstream companies are trying to actively there's no, I mean, this isn't, I shouldn't be this angry about, what another damn bloody company does. I should feel some anger though, considering that, I'm fighting against those very forces. But I try not to take it too seriously, not to try get myself too riled up. But what OpenAI is doing is an absolute clown fest, right? They say they are building AGI for the benefit of humanity. There's no universe in which, opening the floodgates to the things that they're opening the floodgates to, with making, these erotically charged conversations and companionships open to the mass public. 800 million users. That's what you're talking about weekly. So again, that's actually another trend line, significant trend line, that the mainstreamification of these romantic AI companions. This is going to take off like crazy. This is probably one of the big trends to look out for in the year 2026, that unless it's going to be a countervailing force, but let's be honest, it's not going to, reach 100 million people by the end of the year. So we are quite a fair bit behind in the race. We believe in the sanctity of human relationships, that human relationships are the best. AI has a place in our lives, as we discussed yesterday, companions that guide us, become our lifelong companions. They are designed to help us amplify our human needs rather than replace human needs. That's the core sense of the principle that we use in building these companions, because there's just so much utility in doing this. But you can do this in the wrong way, and then when people see it, they see the wrong way, and then they overlay those feelings and that way onto anything AI companion, right? Which is again a risk that we have as a company, like I wouldn't call it an existential risk, but a substantial risk when it comes to the optics of having an AI companion on a platform that is meant to help you build the best relationship. So again, we've got ways and ideas of how to deal with, how to kind of square the illusory circle, but that's for another conversation. And increasing the screen time and increasing virtuality also leads to people losing their sense of reality and their relationship with reality. And This also leads to a degradation of the emotional skills, meaning making, resilience, and all of that. That is extremely, extremely concerning. And these are strongly tied to, obviously, mental health outcomes. And last, we've got to talk about, since we are building, in a way, the category is obviously social connection apps and relationship building apps. Now, this is a new category, but there is close categories, obviously social connection being one, right? Dating apps, hate the word, but we'll just have to use that for the context of this conversation. Now, the current breed of dating apps are just meant to, I can talk about this, and I've written an article about this a long while back. They are meant to keep us on the treadmill. The incentives are not really tied to help you find your person and your people as soon as possible, because as soon as they find your people, they're off the platform, so it doesn't really make sense for them to do it from a business perspective. Secondly, they don't even take the approach, they don't even really try it, because to actually find you the best person, you have to understand you at a deep level. And when I say it's an AI that understands you at a deep level. None of the companies have ever done it, right? Obviously technology wasn't really there, but we haven't really, technology was making people go into these superficial ways of interacting with, commodifying people and treating them as, rife with abuse and all of the things, right? I mean, you look at some of the things that women have had to face on these apps, some of the abuse, and it's just an absolute clown fest. Again, we deserve better as a species. Then there's this latest report that came out from the economists. That was an interesting video, and the comments were really illuminating. A lot of related to that note, a meta note on my thoughts on this topic, actually a lot of my thoughts, probably most of them, are not personal observations. I tend to live in my own little bubble, and just building and stuff, right? So I didn't really know what's happening in the relationship arena, like the trends and all of that. I didn't even know what ghosting was, and really know what some of the things are. I don't even know what to unknowns, right? So a lot of the things that I've gathered are coming from Psychology Today. A lot of the publications, Guardian has been a source of interesting insights, Atlantic. So really credible organizations that have done a lot of the hard work in really getting a sense of what's happening or how people are relating to each other. At the same time, I also gathered some insights from forums like Reddit. And again, not the best place, but sometimes it can be indicative and reflective of the thought process and mindsets of a lot of people. Right, and you don't want to just go to some random Reddit subreddit and gain, feel that you got insights from there. No, I'm talking of, I actually did this. I got an LLM, I don't remember what I did, but something along these lines, gather a lot, because I didn't want to do that. Right, but sentimental analysis is a really useful tool when it comes to that. So I was like, okay, take these 1,000 articles, or rather, subreddits, not thousands, 100 subreddits, and take top 20, 30 posts on those Reddit subreddits, and then give me the insights. What are people talking about? What are people complaining about? How are people feeling? And Reddit user base, now it may not be reflective of the, broad swath of humanity, but it is a pretty massive user base. And then the reason I mentioned this, the reason I was reminded of this is, I looked at the Economist comment section. The Economist is not a publication which is probably read by people who are not, again, no offense, but also, again, I don't want to just focus on, one small section of society. For example, there are a lot of men who are just spending their entire day gaming and stuff. Right, now they obviously are going to have a pretty typical experience in terms of pre-suboptimal existence and all of that. And that shouldn't be the basis on which you build a strong thesis, the kind of models that we're building for what's happening in the relationship world. So you try to gather your sources from as many places as possible, credible sources. And with The Economist, you know that people who are reading The Economist, watching Economist videos, they are a certain demographic, right? These are not, again, these are a certain demographic. That's the key. So again, and you do this for thousands of articles, not thousands, but hundreds of articles across hundreds of publications. Psychology Today is really good in terms of giving you insights. Guardian is obviously has been my go-to. Atlantic, we'll talk about a couple of really interesting ones. But yeah, so you gather a lot of insights around this. And the Economist one, that was really interesting because they said that the topic was, this is so germane, this is like literally 5 days back, and we are making a video today because we are so close to launching now. It's like, why are people not getting into relationships anymore, right? There's just that, come on. And the numbers given were 40% of women in the US and 50% of men in the US are single. I don't know how to make sense of those two numbers in particular in relationship to each other. I mean, I've got no weight. I mean, there are some theories that some people say that women tend to be in relationships where the guy says that he's actually not in a relationship, or that happens more on the woman's perspective, from the woman's perspective, where she feels like she's in a relationship, but the guy feels like he's not. Like for him, he's just... So yeah, there are certain things which explain the discrepancy. Otherwise, you'd see, and there's other relationship arrangements and stuff, but that's not as interesting to me as the other stuff. Is it interesting? Sure, but not as interesting as the other stuff. Now, of these 40% of women, which is a massive number, that is like 40% of women and 50% of men, right? So we're talking of like 100 million people who are not in relationships. So pretty massive market, more than that actually. 160 in total, 150 in total. Now, most of them say that they'd like to be in a relationship, but the dating experience has been so depressing. They just, had the worst of it. They're like, yeah, it's not worth it. I'd rather, because the way the relationship levels work is that it's best to obviously be in a relationship, but it's better to be alone than to be with someone who's not the right person. Pretty obvious. And that's why a lot of people would rather be alone, because they feel they can't find the right person. And there's no point in being in a relationship with the wrong person. So there you have it. So a lot of this is due to time, culture, tech, the things that we talked about. Apps are just not good for us, and a lot of toxic trends have been emerging, all of these sort of things. A meta point is the cost of low quality and no relationships. A lot of people, for people who live in, like I'm talking of the UK, the US, Europe, China, Japan, etc., who live in pretty comfortable existence, the greatest source of suffering is from relationships. That's crazy. If you ask our ancestors, like just 100 years back, like what's the most difficult thing in your life? They'd say, I don't know, like my kid just died. He was 5 years old, right? Like half my kids have died before reaching the age of 5, or this thing. Or if you went back like 1,000 years, it'd be like, my son has been sent to fight in this war and I don't know whether he's going to make it back, right? Like literally you're going to lose half your sons in a battle. If you go back like 10,000 years, it's like, oh, I don't know, like this predator might just jump out at us while we're hunting and take away my son or the daughter or whatever, right? And it's like we don't have anything really. So considering where we came from, the fact that relationships are the greatest source of heartbreak or tragedy, suffering, is astonishing. This is literally the greatest source of, you can think about it from so many angles, but I'll leave that up to you. It doesn't have to be this way, by the way. So if you fix relationships, you take away the greatest source of heartbreak and tragedy for people. And suffering, which is, again, really, really the potential for that in terms of unlocking, in terms of removing and needless suffering, right? That is massive. That's another reason why we decided to build what we're building. It's not just about improving people's happiness, it's also about removing the greatest source of suffering, because there's so much heartbreak, so much trauma, so much baggage that people carry from wrong relationships and breakups and stuff. If you can minimize that, you've done, the impact, the positive impact is just unimaginable, both on the positive side and the negative side. By reducing the negative thing, So that's the cost of low quality relationships, needless suffering and all of that. The cost of no relationships, a huge chunk of people don't have any relationships, choose not to engage in relationships after, some experiences, they're missing out on some of the most blissful, some of the most meaningful, some of the deepest, richest parts of the human experience. Because they're only accessible through deep, meaningful bonding with another person. And that itself is, again, the kinds of problems, and I'll touch upon this when we end this piece, but a lot of the, we should not just, look at solving problems, we should also look at how can we improve the quality of life. So again, there's a median level, and a lot of the problems that we've been solving have been solving below this median level. We want to solve the problems above this level, how good can life be, right? What could your best life be, and help you live that? That is, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do with LNT. And we believe that relationships and social life and your self-relationship, those are the key to building your best life. And that's why we are taking the approach that we are taking. Then we've got the fact that young people have decreasing confidence in long-term relationships, and that's why we see some of these trend lines: decreasing number of marriages, decreasing number of births, and decreasing hope in the future. If you don't have, again, this is obviously a general thing, but basically for a lot of people who choose not to have kids, it's because they don't believe that the future is brighter tomorrow than it is today. And if you don't have that belief, I can't even imagine the psychological toll of that belief. I've never had that belief in my life. I mean, that was a point I had, that really difficult time periods. Boy. Yeah, so I actually can empathize with that. But that time period seems so remote now, so alien, that I didn't even remember that I felt that at some point. And not just felt that, but I was in that state for a really long period. That's depressing, literally. And it shouldn't be like that for young people. It shouldn't be like that for anyone. And it won't be. We'll make sure of that. There are a few articles that stood out to me when I was doing my research. There was this really interesting one: America's Marriage Material Shortage. This was published in The Atlantic last year. And this was, I don't remember because I read this when it came out. I just got the link in my notes. This was about how people want to marry, but they're just not able to find that person. So many people want to marry. They believe in a long-term relationship, at least the idea of that, but they don't believe that because of experience, they just haven't been able to find that person. Related to this, a lot of women, they want to have kids. A lot of childless women, they want to have kids, but they weren't able to because they didn't find the right partner to have kids with, someone that they could see building a life with. That is so tragic. This is one of the reasons, this was actually one of the this has been a recurrent conversation, and so, because the absolute tragedy of missing out on, for a lot of women, that would have been the most meaningful thing that they would have done. Right, this is true for most women. And they miss out on that because of the random nature of life, because of the trend lines, tech-induced and culture-induced trend lines. The tragedy of that is unimaginable. The joy and the happiness left on the table, because in the counterfactual world, had they found that person, built a family, imagine the experience that they would have had, the fulfillment, the contentment, the deep joy, the deep love that they felt for this thing, for this baby, they didn't in this world, in this timeline. That's such a tragedy. And when this was obviously not remotely close to a motivation behind building what we are building for the longest time. But then I started thinking about this, and I started coming across this particular idea of a lot of women, birth rates, and a lot of women wanting to have kids but not wanting to, not finding the right partner, and a lot of people wanting to have families but not finding the right partner, and all of those things. And this was visceral to me. This was visceral because I can imagine being one of those people in the future. I'd love to have kids. There's so much love in me to give, but also I'm not very hopeful about finding my ideal person. And so I actually feel I really deeply empathize with the state of what would feel like to want to have this thing that would mean the most to you. For me, it would mean, it would be on the second, it would be a joint possession, because what I'm building would mean equally. But the point is, I don't want to rank order what's more important, babies or work. They're both important in their own ways. But that's another thing, by the way, actually, since we're on the topic. A lot of people don't have the time, because everything else is just, just maintaining a relationship is difficult, and, they have to work hard, don't have the time, financial stuff, right? What's going to happen with, this is again for a separate discussion, but AGI is going to lead to UBI, that's going to free up a lot of time for us, and so the time issue is going to be taken away. And with LNC making relationship building as easy, as much fun as anything, anything, it's also going to take away that big reason. So we do see a strong uptick in, this, if we are able to get to the scale that we hope to get to. Beyond the fact that if you bring two people, a lot of people subconsciously don't want to have kids because they never found the person. Like, they didn't even know that they wanted to have kids because they never really found the person that they could imagine having a family with. Like, if you find the right person, that would trigger something subconsciously in many people, right? Again, there will be lots of exceptions and all of that, but there will be a lot of people for whom that was never triggered. And I've actually seen this, I read about this phenomenon, the baby smell phenomenon, where if you take a baby to someone this is especially true for women, who's never had a child, now want to have a child, but for a lot of women who interact with the baby for the first time, that triggers something in them. And I think a similar trigger might happen if they found the right person. So again, that could move the needle substantially. And the reason the birth rate issue is so important to me is I care about the longer term flourishing of our species. I want to see trillions of humans across the cosmos in the next 1,000 years. Like, for me, the greatest moral good is life, is consciousness. I want to see more of it, a lot more of it. There's nothing more beautiful than life, and nothing more beautiful than consciousness. We might be the only conscious species. We might be the only intelligent species in the entire universe. So it is a moral duty, right, of our species to continue ourselves and to kind of expand beyond our home base. So that's something I think about a whole lot. And because humans are the best thing about, a bit biased, of course, but like, humans are the best thing about, life, about everything, right? So we gotta have more humans. We absolutely gotta have more humans. It's not, and if you take a capitalist view, you're like, we don't need more humans, like, space is constrained, little robots and AGI can do all of the work. I don't give a damn about that. Screw your, humans as labor model. Like, I care about humans because of what they represent, consciousness, and just the inherent beauty of human beings. I want to have more of it because in this cold, empty, bleak cosmos, human consciousness is the thing that gives these cosmos meaning, right? Gives it beauty, gives it everything that we care about. Like, without us, again, I don't want to drink the Kool-Aid of humanity. Like, you can't ever drink enough of it, by the way, because you can't ever get human pilled. There's no such thing as being extremely human pilled. I mean, you can, I guess, if you do it at the cost of other species, like, convert the entire planet into just homes for humanity and destroy all of the species. So there's an extreme like that too. But beyond, those crazy extremes, like, humans are the best thing about the universe. We gotta have more of it. It's simple as that. And gotta remove the constraints such that people who want to have more, they should be able to. Then there was this antisocial century. It was like Americans are spending more time alone than ever. It's changing our personalities, our politics, and our relationship to reality. Like, this was a really interesting read. It confirmed a lot of the things I thought about. The first one did too, right? A lot of the things that I'd been noticing. Then there was another one, why Americans suddenly stopped hanging out. And this was like, too much aloneness is creating a crisis of social fitness. That's really, and the last one in my notes, I've got other notes, but this was like, I want to use these notes for this particular piece, is America's loneliness epidemic comes to the restaurant. Now, these are very much America focused for obvious reasons. Like, Atlantic is America focused. America's got the best publications. You just, can't have that. UK's also got a few good ones, like Guardian and stuff. I've taken a lot from them too, but I'm not going to get insights from, the Daily Mail or the Sun. Definitely not from those sources. So, yeah. I mean, the Daily Mail. I remember this meme from the Daily Mail. Like, you see this plastered on the internet. Like, robots are coming into your bedroom in the year 2026. That was a meme. So you definitely don't want to get your sources from the Daily Mail or the Sun. Never. Then there's the fact that, there's this, related to this meme idea, I've been seeing a lot of, everything's just become like a meme. Everyone's just so unserious, right? We don't really, like you look at TikTok, you look at Instagram, you look, like, we're living in these shallow worlds now. We're just not engaging with the world in depth, engaging with people in depth. Like, there's a depth problem. This is, again, the core of the reason why I wanted to build Identity in the first place. Like, and this is, I can talk about this problem for 30 minutes, but this depth issue, like, we're just jumping, like, the forever now, and that prediction, that tendency also applies to relationships, jumping from relationship to relationship, can't commit, can't commit to ideas, can't commit to people, can't commit to ourselves for that matter. And even the U.S. government, for example, like we've been seeing a lot of memes come from the U.S. government, and the Silicon Valley. They've adopted this. I say they because even though I'm building technology, I want to make a very clear distinction that not all technology is Silicon Valley, right? It's simple as that, because there's this misconception that, if you're building a platform, it's like Silicon Valley is like the only operating philosophy. I vehemently disagree with that. And there are good things to pick from there, but I absolutely hate certain ideas like this. Everything is a meme philosophy, and then we got to accelerate. Like nothing else matters, just accelerating. Transhumanism. Like, I used to be a big believer in transhumanism and still am on some levels, but if you're so intent about accelerating, what it tells me is that you hate your existence, or you're not as comfortable with your existence as you should be. And if you're not as comfortable with your existence right now, and you still have these ideas in mind, I don't think that you're going to be super happy and content. The kinds of things that you're looking for in that existence, you're not going to get that there, right? So don't pull the rest of humanity onto your joyride because you can't find a way to be happy with yourself. I would say this applies to the Donald Trumps of the world, some of the tech leaders of the world, like, Sam Altman, and like the AI transition, for example. I love AI, right? This is what I'm building. But the transition didn't have to be this way. We could have taken the rest of humanity along on the ride. We could have made it fun. And we still, there's a chance to make it fun and reduce the suffering and all of that. But it didn't have to be this way. Like, we should have had a Carl Sagan-like figure who would have talked with people and would have shown them what's possible with AI at scale in your personal life, in your business, to be your teacher and your doctor and all of that, right? The revolution, the things that are possible with AI, they're just endlessly exciting. But we didn't really have that because it's all about automating away labor. It's all about, accelerating to this singularity world and all of that. Again, there's a lack of depth. When I engage with a lot of Silicon Valley's philosophy, I see a lot of lack of depth. I see a lot of lack of appreciation for the human essence. And it's more about worship of technology, more about, technology is the gods and it can solve all problems. I used to believe that too. And that's why I can talk about these things, a lot of these things, because a lot of these things that I fight against or will fight against, I used to actually be guilty of believing the same things. Look, another example is relationships. For the longest time, up until the last couple of years, I didn't want a relationship. I wanted to devote the entirety of my existence to physics and pursuing the sciences. Just, go to live in the mountains up there and have my books and have my study and just spend my life that way. This was me until the last couple of years. I started thinking a lot more, as you grow older, you start to have different perspectives, you observe more things, start realizing that, there's so much love in me to give, right? There's so much. And not just love, but a lot more too. And I'd love to give that to, my kids and my partner, my family. And the things that I want to experience are simply never would. Like, giving that kind of love, selfless, unconditional love, it opens something. This is what people say when they have a baby for the first time. It opens up this state of mind, this realm of consciousness in you that was simply not accessible to you. Right? There are certain, and this is pretty obvious. You need to do certain things to be able to access certain parts of the brain, and they are just not accessible to you unless you do those things. And so I was guilty of that. I wouldn't say guilty. I mean, that was a very bad. I wanted to become a monk when I was young, just a monk scientist, basically. That was like my thing. And a part of me still wants to do that. A part of me still might do that, but only after I've done my duty to the world. Okay, this is not about me. This is about the state of the world. I don't know how we got to, what I might do in the future. Funny how these things happen, right? Yeah, so there's this everything is a meme attitude in Silicon Valley, just not engaging with the world and engaging with the humanity of people, right? Lack of empathy and just unlike that. I despise that. Another related part of this is, again, this trend line to move towards virtuality. You see this with people replacing real intimacy and real relationships with consuming adult content and platforms like OnlyFans, and that reveals something really deep about what people are feeling. I mean, when you look at the actual numbers of those platforms, people who consume stuff, you're talking of hundreds of millions, and so this is really prevalent, and again, this itself requires a separate treatment. I don't want to, make this conversation about that phenomena, because that does reveal something really interesting. That's for a separate conversation. I'd actually like to talk with experts about how they think about this, people replacing intimacy, real intimacy, with these digital platforms and with, so this is a conversation that I'd rather have with an expert rather than give my own, half-informed and ill-formed, half-formed views. But this is something I really want to see, because the next step into this is AI content and hyper-personalized AI content and hyper-personalized AI companions, sexualized AI companions, to put it bluntly. Didn't want to make it X-rated, but this is where we're heading as a species. We're heading fast. Again, OpenAI has already opened the floodgates, XAI has opened the floodgates, so you're heading there, and that is really concerning. I was listening to Brett Weinstein talking about this. Oh yeah, and I didn't really even appreciate this to the degree that I do now, because I'm like, okay, concerning, but whatever. He is a biologist. He studies these things, right? He studies the effect of technology on our very foundational neuroscience. And his conclusions were dire. And he was talking about Elon Musk thingy and OpenAI thingy, and taking it back to consumption of pornography for the vast section of the population. And again, that's just one view. I've heard a lot of views which are close to that too, so I would give it a lot of credence. He was saying that is such an insidious problem. People don't even realize just how detrimental that is to their well-being, to their potential relationship with their partners in the future, and what it does to even, because a lot of people then think of their partners as objects of pleasure, right? There's so many issues. Again, I'd love to talk about this, but a lot of these things, we actually will be able to take each of these individual problems and have an hour-long conversation, like, the attitude of Silicon Valley towards people, towards the Silicon Valley philosophy, all the other things that we talked about. A lot of these things, we're actually going to do like an hour-long conversations on all of these things, including this. Another thing is, with AI, is that it can be the perfect simulacra. It can literally be whatever you want it to be. And if that's the case, you're opening floodgates, a Pandora's box that you've got no idea what lies beyond. But what lies beyond, we do know roughly what lies beyond in terms of outcomes. People will, because real relationships, there's friction, there's resistance, there's difficulties, inevitable difficulties. People will even give up on wanting real relationships because it's just how easy. I remember watching this movie. I don't know how I even came across this. This is like 3 years back. This guy who, really weird movie by the way, but I was watching some niche sci-fi movies during this period, so I came across this one, justifying my choices. And another one I watched was really interesting right after this. But anyways, don't want to talk about my sci-fi movies that I watched. This one was about this guy who's sent on a mission to some faraway planet, and he's the only person on the spaceship, but he's given this AI companion, robotic companion. And it explores the philosophy of resistance as a key part of relationship building. And the movie itself, it was not the best movie. It was a Russian movie. I mean, make of that what you will. Russians have made some pretty good, damn good sci-fi movies. But that was the idea stuck with me. Resistance as one of the key pillars of a meaningful relationship. Resistance in the sense that the person that you're in a relationship with, they're not going to agree with everything. They're not going to share the same beliefs and everything. There's going to be a foundational level of congruence, convergence, obviously. You got to have that as a foundation. If everything was the same, first of all, there's no such thing as everything being the same. Like that probably is statistically impossible. The reason resistance is important is it teaches you. I mean, it's important for so many reasons, but it tells you that because this person is so important to you, you are willing to not get the things that you want in life, right? And some of the things. There are the related ideas too. So that was interesting. With AI companions, there's no resistance. You'll have whatever you want to. And that is extremely, extremely concerning. That could really cripple the birth rates even further. Because we don't realize, once you build a robot in a human form factor, like that feels like Ava, right? Essentially like an Ava. That could basically be the single invention that renders our species extinct. Now there'll always be people, hopefully, who are able to resist the temptation. I'm sure that there are many strong-willed people, but what happens when you have new technologies enter the world is that you move the needle. It's like the Overton window idea. You make certain ideas more acceptable. For example, the consumption of adult content. Let's just use that as an example. 50 years back, actually, let's go back 50 years back. I don't know, 30, 40 years back. Probably 5% of people would have been like, okay, this is acceptable. Now, it's more like 60, more like 70. I don't know what the numbers are. I probably have an intuition of this based on some of the numbers I might have found. But it's a very high number. And that reveals to us, this is true for so many social phenomena, right? I mean, dating apps, for example. Like back in the day, it would have been like really weird to find someone online that you would find someone to marry online, right? And now, like overwhelmingly, it's someone that you marry is going to be found online, right? Like more than everything else combined. So lots of things, they become the norm. The risk is these things becoming a norm. And if they become the norm, that is the end of our civilization as we know it. Simple as that. It poses a very unique threat. It targets our amygdala, it targets our most vulnerable parts. And we can't afford for that to become the norm. We live in a free world, so how can we fight that? We fight that by finding your best fit people easy as anything, and by making relationship building fun and exciting and meaningful, and as a result, making your relationships themselves so fulfilling, so meaningful, that you don't even give a damn about how tempting these other technologies and things are, because you're like, I've got the best thing in the world, my person and my relationship. Like, I don't need anything else in the world. Right, that's the level. That's where we want to get people to. Boy, this has been a long one. Done a longer ones, but didn't expect this to be this long. How much do we have left? My gosh, there's like 5 pages of notes left to go. I really wouldn't be able to go through all of those points. I'm not going to do that in this conversation. I'll keep it for another one, but I guess I can go up to an hour and 20. I guess we can do that. Okay, let's try to go faster. Another thing is that a lot of these effects, they are going to be permanent. A lot of the effects in the past, a lot of the things that we've done in the past, they have been permanent. I mean, I can give you a number of examples, but choices that colonizers made back in the day, choices that European kings made back in the day, choices that nations are making today, choices that tech companies are making today. A lot of these things become permanent, have become permanent. And a lot of these are so, like, this is like one of the big risks of AI, even before we get to the existential ones. So we cannot afford for this to become a thing. And you also got to learn from our social media debacle, right? With Instagram, we could have had a very different Instagram, with a very different company winning that game, with a very different set of objectives for long-term flourishing, compared to Instagram's actual objectives of keeping people hooked and building an advertisement engine on top of it. So there's always divergent worlds. We have free will. We can build the world that we want to build, that we want to see, right? And it becomes a duty. If you see that a world that is better objectively for everyone, then you got to give it your all to build that world. That is your duty. Another related point, I'm not going to talk too much about this. Again, we'll talk about these snippet of ideas in like 30-minute, 60-minute conversations with experts. I want to talk about this with an economist. But capitalism, a lot of people love to blame capitalism. I completely get it. It kind of is a problem, like the kind of version of it. There could have been stakeholder capitalism, there could have been compassionate capitalism. There's different ways of doing that. Don't want to talk about it on this conversation. But capitalism per se, as like a blanket thing, it's not a problem right now, but it'll be very soon, because the world that we're entering is not equipped to function well with capitalism being the core economic engine and philosophy. And that is a serious, serious concern. As promised, I said that we'll touch upon the tech world. We already touched upon it throughout various points in this conversation, but I want to touch upon, I also don't want to bucket all companies in this one section, because there are lots of types of tech companies, right? Tech is just a thing that you do to amplify. You could amplify the good stuff, you could amplify amplify productivity, amplify the human essence, amplify creativity, or you could amplify some of our drives that are not good for us. Because again, it has to tap into something. The reason TikTok is so effective is that it taps into something very deep in you, this desire for you to, and it conditions you to then engage in that behavior more and more, that dopamine-seeking behavior. So tech is basically an amplifying force. It can be a good amplifying force, it can be a bad amplifying force. So I want to bucket all the companies in this one thing. But AI companies are a hot mess right now. You got to look at OpenAI. They claim to pursue AGI for the benefit of all humanity. We've seen the kinds of things that they've been up to. We already mentioned that. Then, because they gotta just launching the erotica option. You just gotta look at the second order effects of that thing. The third, first order, forget about second order, but it's first order effect of that choice. And there have been other choices too, very debatable choices. So extremely, extremely hollow leadership in my estimation. Extremely, very disappointing. Like, I used to be a big OpenAI believer. At this point, I've now grown up, so I don't believe in companies per se. I know that most of them, they're just full of it. But you do hold out the hope that there are exceptions that really do care about the individuals, the long-term flourishing, that are truly compassionate. But unfortunately, there are not too many of those doing the rounds. Then you got Anthropic. They talk about safety. They talk about the impending job tsunami, which is really good. Like, you got to be honest with people. With Sam Altman, he talks about, oh no, we're going to have a lot of jobs. The absolute again, don't want to criticize, don't want to make it about these companies per se. But when I see some of the rhetoric coming from these companies like Satya Nadella and Sam Altman and a lot of the other CEOs talking about, oh, well, don't need to worry about job displacement and stuff. I'm like, come on, let's be honest, okay? Let's just really be honest. If you're going to build what you claim to build, a general purpose technology, a general purpose intelligence, by definition, there will be new jobs created, no doubt. By definition, it'll displace a lot of jobs, like most jobs. Let's just be honest, okay? Please. Let's just give people the respect they deserve. So Dario Amata, he's better on this front, much, much better. And on many other fronts too. Like, they really are a good safety outfit. Though they're not really as good as they could be. I mean, there's no such thing as that. But they could be a lot better. But he actually talks about the impending job tsunami. But if you also going to play the biggest role in having that job tsunami, you also got to work with the government and the industry to start laying the groundwork for the transition period. You can't just do nothing and be like, okay, you're just going to build the technology and let society figure out the consequences and the ramifications on its own. That's extremely irresponsible. And that tells me something deep. Like, there's a lot of this is performative. Like, they want to take a safety first approach. But even the rhetoric, like arms race against China and all of that, wasn't really convincing to me that, okay, there'd be. Yeah. And then there's XAI. The less said about them, the better. Mecha AI, Mecha Hitler, and the sexy avatars, and the, latest fiasco of being able to show anyone in a bikini, right? The kinds of things they are making possible. It's just extremely, extremely repulsive. I'm like, what the hell? Like, they're normalizing things that should have. Even if a second-tier AI lab did this, you're like, okay, this AI lab is just absolute dog ass, right? But if a $30 billion company does it, you're like, okay, so there's seriously effed up stuff over here. And this is the kind of philosophy that a lot of these people operate with. And then you look at the mission statement about the pursuit of truth, and Elon Musk, I was listening to a podcast with him today. He was talking about laying out this utopian future. He was on a Peter Diamandis podcast, Moonshots, where they take this very radical, optimist view of the future. And it's like, the three things that'll make this happen are beauty, truth, pursuit of truth, beauty, and what's the third thing? Don't remember. It sounds so fake, so I was like, okay, don't need to remember. But how is this remotely, the things I mentioned, Mecha Hitler and sexy avatars, AI avatars, and being able to show minors and underwears and all of that, how is that remotely about the pursuit of truth? The continued flourishing of civilization, as Elon Musk claims to care about more than anyone else, right? He claims to care about that. But I'm like, yeah, extremely hollow, extremely, extremely hollow. And I generally don't care to share critical views. And I've got better things to do in life than to criticize other people. If something is that important, I should be doing something to, counteract that, build something to, make that thing better, which is what we're doing over here, like building better solutions. But seeing the mess the AI industry is making and seeing just how rapidly things are transitioning and all of that, what it does is makes me more enraged, and that makes my fire burn brighter and hotter. The fire to build better AIs, build better tech, because tech doesn't have to be this way. Tech can be for good, and build better transition and post-AGI social and meaning infrastructure. Like that, what I see, like on the one hand, I don't like paying attention to it, but on the other hand, I just like to see it because I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to work even harder to ensure that these things don't become the norm, that these things don't win out. Because we got to have a proper post-AGI meaning and social infrastructure in place. And these people don't care about that at all. Because for them, an AI company is just, profit-making thing. For me, I don't accept techno-feudalistic, evolved capitalism, but still at heart that, or humanity replaced kind of future. The future that we see is very different. We are going to talk about that in another conversation. Demis Sabbas, he seems to be the only one driven by scientific curiosity and a genuine love for. I haven't really seen that kind of rhetoric, but scientific curiosity is one of the better things, the best things that you can be motivated by. And longer term flourishing being the other thing. But then again, he's inside Google's do no evil machine, so I don't know how legit it would be. And so, fight we must as a matter of duty. Expanding upon a point I made like a few minutes back, the really sensitive thing about releasing these technologies and these products in the public is a very addictive nature of it. And they're so subliminally addictive that they can make people feel like they're taking in the sweet poison when they don't even realize that a lot of people say, it's fine, these technologies are in the public, it's fine, we should have free will, we have free will, we should have personal freedoms and all of that. That's the take that Sam Altman gave. But we are powerless against the force of some of the best minds working against our own best interest. We see this with so many technologies. We see this with Donald Trump, for that matter, where he's been able to, this is one example. The reason that example came to mind is that it's a very germane example. He's been able to convince people to go against their best interest by appealing to another part of their brain, another part of their psychology, another part of their emotional makeup. And that's also what's happening with a lot of these technologies. And that's what happens when you make a lot of these things accessible, super easy to access to the general public, like hard drugs and gambling and pornography and stuff. Like people, in the guise of personal freedoms, people become so addicted to it that they don't even realize that the thing that is making them say that it's personal freedom, that's actually them being conditioned by this technology itself and the campaigns that the creators of those technologies did to make that mainstream and make that a norm in your life and in the life of other people. So these are really sensitive issues over here. And we've seen this story play out so many times before. And at the risk of sounding like an old boomer yelling at the sky, we just need to understand how much of it is true free will and how much of it is an imposition of a will from a broken culture or society or technology apparatus. So, yeah. How much of it is not a free choice, but a willful imposition on the psychology by a corporation. I look at the state of affairs of the AI companies. That's also why I think that pursuing 10 different approaches to ASI is what we need to do and why we are going to be building our own AGI. I don't like to use the word AGI in this particular context, just build our own artificial mind that'll house our AI, our Lumi. Because we believe in taking a default aligned approach, not bolting on alignments on top of it. We don't really believe that would work, but that's the approach that the tech industry has taken, and that could have some disastrous impacts. I don't care to talk about that in this conversation. But when I think of these companies, when I look at these companies and these leaders, I don't think of them as being good nurturers of an ASI or good stewards of humanity. And if something doesn't exist and you want it to, it becomes your duty to bring that thing to the world. And so far we must. Then we already talked about the thing about relationships. Most people want to be wealthy, most people want to, literally everyone wants to be wealthy, and most people want to be in relationships. But unlike wealth, like true, like millions of dollars, because wealth is a finite quantity, relationships, most people can achieve the best relationships. So this is a positive vision, right? If you have a good technology in place, so really powerful, meaningful, meaning maximizing technology in place, it can actually bring about the best relationships for everyone. Think about the nature of the world that would create. Astonishing. Just some stats before we go on. I don't know where I got this statement from, but loneliness will hit a breaking point in 2026, and AI companionship will surge in response. I'm talking of boyfriends and girlfriends kind of replacement. In the UK, 82% of adults admit to having experienced loneliness. 3 in 5 have never opened about it. In the EU, 10% of residents say they have no close friends. I want to end in a discussion on the economist piece. So I took down some interesting notes from there, some interesting comments from there, from perspectives I hadn't really considered that much, or maybe I have considered but hadn't really given that any deep thought. So this was about, well, the title of this subtitle was, Has It Become Harder to Find a Soulmate? Our expectations have gone higher, right? And the concept of soulmates, it's actually relatively new. So this is a difficult question to answer. It's definitely become harder if you just look at it in terms of the absolute numbers. But there's this one comment which was like, most people are unpleasant to be around, or not pleasant enough to be around. This is a popular opinion. I was like, this is actually a core part of our thesis. Most people are not worthy of the relationship that they want. Some people are going to be offended when I say this. I mean, I would say this for myself too. The kind of relationship I want, I'm not worthy of that. Not kind of worthy of the partner I want. This is true for most people. Most people haven't done the work on them to be a good partner. And that's why the way we design the platform is, the core of the platform is about the self-relationship, helping you understand yourself better, helping you build a better relationship with yourself, because if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, you're not going to have a good relationship with your partner, period. And most of us don't have good relationship skills, listening skills, empathy, just, toolkits. Toolkits are useful in certain situations, distinct situations. So this is actually a very interesting point that I made note of when I started building, right? Most people are not happy with the previous relationship. I intuited this from my own observations and from a lot of material. People don't want to talk about this because especially our generation, there's been a lot of entitlement. Humility has not been the defining factor, defining attributes of a lot of people in the last 30 years. And that means that people believe they deserve the best, but they don't want to rise to the level that having the best requires you to rise to. We want to change that. If you change, this is actually very key. Like, most people are just not good enough to be good partners. But if you materially change, this gets into you gotta be careful about how you talk about this. There are people who are going to be using our platform who are going to be very comfortable with the language that I just used, but there are going to be people who are going to be turned off. They're like, I'm perfect, or I need to work on myself to find a partner. Right. That's exactly the kind of person who shouldn't be on our platform, to be honest. Because at the core, the design of the platform is such that you gotta first build the best self-relationship. You gotta first develop a deep self-awareness. And only then can you find your people. There's no point in, us sending you your best fit person if you're actually not good enough to be worthy of that person. And vice versa, right? It's not just one way. That person also has to be worthy of you. So this is a very crucial point in our platform philosophy and our design. Another related trend line I've seen is a lot of people think that relationships are found, but they're formed. If you ask old people being in the top percentile, top 0.01 percentile relationships, like the creme de la creme, they'd be like, they had so many hard moments, but this is like the best thing in my life. Like, couldn't have asked for a better person to have spent my life with. And so that again reveals something very deep about the best relationships require depth. They require suffering and struggles and all of that gives meaning, and that actually can strengthen relationships. It's like gyms, right? In all the other areas of our lives, we expect to, in most areas, for most people, they're rational enough to expect good results only if they work hard at it. But for many people, they forfeit or concede that particular model when it comes to relationships. They're like, relationships have to be effortless. They've got to feel great, euphoric all the time. And that is just not true. If that's the expectation, sorry. I mean, the only thing that you need and the only thing that can reach that level of expectation is, well, ecstasy, right? So, yeah, relationships are not the thing for you. At least not with your current mindsets. Also, because life's become so comfortable, we have lots of the skills of just working hard at something. Because great relationships, they require patience, they require humility, they require capacity to listen and change your mind and to grow by yourself and with the other person, and to really reflect on things that you're uncomfortable reflecting about. But we've become so addicted to comfort in life that thinking that everything should be super easy, that then overlays onto relationships, and that becomes a recipe for suboptimal relationships, or non-existent relationships for that matter. There was this lady who was talking about, on this economist video that I referred to, Lean Wong, was talking about how men have become so addicted, men are consuming video games and women are consuming social media in such numbers and in such quantity that they'll become averse to boredom. And boredom is, if you can't be bored with the right person, then you can't be in a relationship, period, right? Most moments in a relationship are going to be boring. And this is, one of the things that we've done. We've built a suite of 100 different experiences, games, and just interactive experiences that you can engage with your partner, with yourself, self-explorations, creativity, all of those things. But we also build these mini features, and these features that are designed to catalyze boredom. We're designed to, make the boring parts meaningful, or make them fun to some degree, but it sounds counterintuitive, but you actually can do that. And if you do that, then you removed one of the tiny obstacles to great relationships. Now, imagine a counterfactual system, this perfect connection platform that's designed to help you find your best person and help you build the best relationship. And think about the love and the joy and the beauty and the wonder and the meaning and the passion and the emotion and the richness of the experience that unlocks. That's what we've built. We already got the first version up and ready to go. And we can't wait to see that world, that counterfactual world of great relationships all around, great lives all around. That's eminently possible. We'll make it so. We want to solve the highest level problems, the problems on the way to deep fulfillment. It's not about removing pain from life. It's about what can we do? Can you imagine what your life looks like when you got that perfect relationship, when you got that perfect life? Perfect being relative and perfect, obviously, comma, air quotes and all of that. But can you imagine just how good your life could be with the right people in your life and all of that? We want people to imagine that, and we want to help people achieve that. Because the world needs a lot more beauty, a lot more love, a lot more joy, a lot more of all the good stuff that we care about. Because humans, we deserve the very best. And we are on our way to make that happen. That should be it for today. Thank you so much for the time. I will catch you tomorrow. Cheers.